Okay, today we have an 05 rav4 that is this shape. It is the 2AZ-FE motor, and the fault with these is a loss of oil pressure. So we're going to show you in this video how to remedy that, and you'll know that it's happened because your oil low pressure light will show up. That is this little guy here. Okay, we've got a nickname for that light in the trade. We call it the too late light. So if you see that show up, you want to stop driving as soon as you possibly can. So what these things do is, if they have the wrong oil put in them at some stage in their life, they sludge up the motor, and then what happens is the sludge goes down into the sump, and then it blocks up the oil pickup. Alright, so I'm doing this one at home. This is actually my sister's car. This is the third time now that I've gone through this process. You can expect to have to do this process a few times at least. After this happened, she was driving to work one day, low oil pressure light came on. She pulled into the garage right across the road from her work. And they did the first step in this process, which is of course to make sure that it actually has lost oil pressure. So to take the oil pressure sender out, put a gauge in there, make sure it is actually losing pressure and it's not just a fault with the sender. So that's the first step, but most commonly it is actually losing oil pressure in these because they block that oil pickup. So from then on it becomes a cleaning process. Like I say, this is the third time I've had to do it on this one. So I did it the initial time, I did it 3,000 k's later, 5,000 k's later, and then so 3,000 k's, and then from that 3,000 another 5,000 k's, and this time from that 5,000 we're now going another 7,000 k's. Okay, there's a little bit of guesswork in that. You can hear in these when they start to get low on oil pressure, because they'll start getting rattly in the top end. The lifters will start to rattle. You don't want noise in the bottom end. If you get a knocking down low, that's all over Red Rover. That means you run a big end bearing, and then you're looking at a second-hand motor, or expensively rebuilding the one you've got, because normally you'll damage the crank as well, and then you've got to get another crank, and you've got to get everything machined, and yeah, it just gets expensive. Okay, so with these at work, we have gone to the extent of like taking the rocker cover off, the whole chain cover, and steam cleaning right through the whole motor, putting it all back together. And it didn't really achieve much, to be honest. It still ended up sludging up again. So what I've done with this one, the first time I did it, I pulled the rocker cover off. This one wasn't too bad up the top, but I just took out all of the sludge that I could, and then put it back together and focused mainly on the bottom end. So the bottom end is what we're going to be looking at. So like I said, the problem is with putting the wrong oil in. What you need is a fully synthetic, sorry, it's all backwards because of the camera, but it's a fully synthetic 5W30. Generally in the best brand you can find, don't buy a cheap brand, it's just not worth it. Get a decent brand of oil filter as well, to catch as much of the rubbish as you can without it clogging up the system. Okay, but if you use the wrong oil, that's what actually causes these things to sludge up. Okay, the other note is engine flush. Don't use that, because if you get any deposits around the motor and then you use engine flush, all you end up doing is washing them off and ending up with them going through everything. Whereas in some ways it's better to, if they're going to stay put, leave them to stay put, basically. Yeah, so you'll see a lot of videos saying that don't use engine flush. Engine flush is all good in a clean motor, but not one that's sludging up like this. Cool, so we'll get this jacked up and we will get started. I have heard people say that they don't put axle stands under if their head fits under when the car's on the ground. That's a stupid idea, because as soon as the thing falls down it's going to go down on its suspension and will kill you. So first step is to drain the oil. There's a 14mm. And yes, I am wearing gloves today. You see stuff all over the internet about people being soft for wearing gloves. Those things are never ridden by actual mechanics who work with this stuff all day, every day, and get all manner of things all over their skin. But especially in the case of these things where it's actually sludged up oil, it's really not good for you on your hands. So if you've got gloves available, good idea to wear them. Okay, so it's a good idea to drain the oil while the engine is hot, if that's possible. If you're doing this the first time and the lights come on, then you don't necessarily want to be running it, and then you'll just have to do it cold. Good idea to take the oil cap off while you drain, just to allow more air flow through. Next thing I'm going to do is just remove this plastic cover, which is a series of 10mm bolts and a couple of plastic clips. Okay, so you can see now this half sump here, that's what we're aiming to get off. But what I need to do first is just to remove this section of exhaust here that's in the way, partly because it's in the way of the bolts, partly because it's going to be easier to work with cleaning the surface when it's there, but also partly so I'm not draining oil all over the exhaust, so that when I put it back on it's going to be covered in oil and it'll smoke up a storm. For the sake of 4 volts to remove that section makes life a lot easier. Just going to spray some of this on my exhaust bolts. Any sort of penetrant will do. CRC 556 is sort of just the classic one. It just happens to be the one I have. Okay, so just a note for when it comes to reassembly, this end you will have a gasket that fits in here. That'll still be stuck in the pipe back there at the moment. This front end here has this cone shape and it has these springs on it that bolt on the bolts. That's because it's a flexible joint, so it's allowed to move around a bit as the motor moves. So you don't want to use any sealer in here, because if you put sealer on there and then when the motor moves, it's just going to break the sealer. So you just leave that as it is and bolt it straight on with the springs and it'll be fine. Okay, so we now have a series of 10mm bolts around our sump. Okay, now so with all our bolts out, oil filter out of the way, you can see there's like a flat face of aluminium here. There's one on the back you can use as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a screwdriver and sit flat against the aluminium, and I'm just going to tap it in there with a hammer. What I want to do is basically just start the seal to break and let some air in there. And then I should be able to pull the rest of it round. So this little bit of the sump will bend down, and then I'll just have to straighten that up before I put it back on again. Just being careful not to gouge the aluminium. if you can hear it there, but as you sort of get it so far and it starts to break that seal, it'll start pulling away. You can hear the change in sound there. And now we should be able to just start to pry it down. And that has come away. So now's a good time just to check the bottom of the sump. Make sure you don't have metal filings all through there. There's a couple of little bits of deposits there, but there's no actual metal in it, which is a good sign. Okay, so this guy here is our target. This is the oil pickup that has a filter screen on it to filter the oil before it gets up into the oil pump. This is what blocks up on them. So I've got two 10mm nuts here that I'm going to undo, and I'm just going to pull that whole unit off. Okay, we've got a metal gasket on there as well, which we can reuse. Okay, so you can see all that rubbish in there blocking that screen up. So our next step is to dismantle this and clean it out. So this will, the first time you do it, will obviously look much worse than our one does today, because this is our third time through. So now we're really just on preventative maintenance, and I can assess each time by how much this is blocked up, how soon I'm going to need to do it again, roughly. It's all a bit of guesswork. So the thing here, you've got all these metal tabs that we need to just bend away so we can pull this front cover off. The trouble with doing this obviously is every time you do this you're bending metal back and forward, and they are only going to bend so many times before they break, and then you'll need to replace this part altogether. So I'm really just trying to bend them as little as I can get away with, so as to prolong their life as much as I can. So I want to go just far enough to get those off. Okay, so you can see this piece is just a straight through, and this is our piece here that is all blocked up. Cool. So that all needs to be cleaned out. So now we have the cover and the screen, so now we just need to separate those two. Again, we are going to need to bend these tabs back, and same story with them. Basically they are only going to bend so many times before they are going to want to break. Okay, so we're not too bad today. You can see all that clump of sludge sitting on there. So the first time we did this and we had no oil pressure, this was just blocked, the whole lot. You can see it builds up in there. This thing unfortunately sort of helps to catch it and holds it in there. So now basically it's a matter of cleaning everything up. So you can use like a kerosene, a white spirit, you can use brake clean. Normally I use, when I'm at home, obviously at work we've got proper cleaning baths and everything to use, which normally with this I just take it into work to clean it up. But at home I'll just use a kerosene, and then I'll just go over it with brake clean afterwards to get rid of any residue from the kerosene. Need to clean the sump as well, and we're going to have to scrape off any old silicone around the edges and do the same on the aluminium surface of the engine before we're ready to reassemble. Okay, so to start with, just get some Kuro. I'm just going to tip some into a tray. And I'm just going to set this in here to have a bit of a soak. Okay, obviously you want to be careful with Kuro. It's very flammable and it's very poisonous. Make sure there's no kids or animals around. Put it up on a bench somewhere. Make sure there's nobody smoking or any flames around it. It's going to set the whole thing on fire. But otherwise, we'll leave that to soak and go and have coffee while it does so. Okay, don't know if you can really see there on the angle all the crap that is left in the kerosene from these bits just soaking in it. So I'm going to tip all that out now. Give it a bit of a wipe out. And I will replace it with a white spirit, get rid of some residue. So this is the one I use, Fuel Light. And I'll just let that soak again in this stuff for a little bit. I'm using Fuel Light to chase up the kerosene on everything else as well, cleaning out the sump and all the other bits. Got to give this guy a clean too. So in terms of disposing of these little bits of kerosene and Fuel Light, etc., for small jobs like these, I just put them in with my waste oil, because most waste oil, well, here where we are in New Zealand anyway, old waste oil is actually recycled into furnace oil, so it will get remade into stuff like kerosene, etc. again. And these ones will be nice and clean now too. The other good thing about a white spirit like Fuel Light is I've just pulled that out now, so that's wet, but it will actually dry itself off very quickly as well. Evaporate very quickly. Be all technical and all that. So then you just want to check your screen, check all the holes. And you might just get a couple of them have got little bits stuck in them still, so you just want to make sure that those are cleared out before you reassemble it. Cool, so those are clear now. You can just use like a pin or something to push stuff out, or compressed air blow through it, which will help it dry as well. But you can see that bit that I've just set down there for about a minute is now dry as well. So we can now put those back together. So if we look at the shape of these, they're not actually perfectly square, they sort of taper in. Make sure we're putting it on the right way round. It probably won't fit if you do try and put it backwards. And then I'm just going to need to grab a pair of pliers. Okay, so we're just going to make sure we bend our tabs back over with pliers. Make sure it can't fall off. Okay, and our sump now, we have given a clean out. What we need to do is find that corner where we've bent it down, and basically what you do is you want to look straight across it flat and just see if that has curved off at all, and if it has, you just sit it flat on the concrete and tap it down with a hammer and then check it again to make sure it's all nice and flat and square. And we've cleaned off the old gasket using the scraper and wire brush. A little bit more to do there, that will just tidy up. So it's fairly easy to do on the sump because the sump is steel. The aluminium we need to be a little bit more careful with, we won't use the wire brush. So this is the scraper that I'm using today. Not really the ideal scraper for using on aluminium because it is a little bit too sharp really for aluminium. You got to be careful with aluminium that you don't gouge it. So I'd prefer to use something slightly broader and less sharp, a little bit blunter than this on aluminium normally, but this is what I've got, so I've just got to be careful with it. Working underneath, good idea to chuck some safety glasses on just to save you dropping anything in your eye, or even for oil dripping in your eye while you're under there. And it's really just a matter of starting at a point and making your way around. Okay, so now we are ready to reassemble. So we are going to put our filter screen back on first, or pickup screen. Don't forget the gasket. Okay, this should be a steel gasket, which you can reuse. You can chuck a new one in if you feel so inclined. But I'm just going to reuse this one. So gasket on first, then the pickup screen, and our two 10mm bolts, nuts, sorry. Kind of assuming if you're taking this job on that you know a little bit about what you're doing, and you'll have an idea of how sort of tight you can do bolts and nuts like this up. Obviously the smaller the diameter of the thread you're doing up, generally the weaker it's going to be, and you don't want to do them up too tight because you don't want to break those studs. If you do that, you are going to have issues of a rather large kind, because they don't look like they'd be in a very easy spot to drill out. Okay, so that's on there now. Get our sump ready. Okay, so you would have seen when we took it off that it's basically got no gasket, it's just got silicone holding it on, so you just need some form of silicone. I like to use the grey silicons. I just think they look a bit tidier than like the oranges and the reds and blacks and all that. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're just going to run a bead around the centre of here, but around each bolt hole we want to scoop in the inside of it. We want to stop any oil getting to that bolt hole where it could leak out. A little bit easier doing this if you've got the proper nozzle on there, but I don't have that today. Like I say, normally that would be much tidier looking than that. It's a proper nozzle. But it's all going to look the same in the end. Gosh, it looks even worse on the camera now that I look at it. It looks like there's more on there than there is. Okay, and I just want to make sure I clean away any oil that has made its way down onto that surface. Make sure that the silicone is going to seal properly on there. Make sure you've got it the right way around. So two of these that are on the bottom of the chain cover are actually studs, so we can just start nuts on them. I just want to be holding it up against the surface while I get things started, and then I'll do a bolt in each of the other corners. So like anything like this, you want to start all of the bolts before you tighten any of them up. So if you need to move the sump around slightly to get any of the holes to line up, you can still do that as long as they're not. Okay, so now all the bolts are started, I can start doing them up. Again, I don't want to be swinging on them too tight, because I don't want to break any bolts or any of the studs. And basically what I'll do is start in one corner, and then I will go to the opposite corner over here, and then back over here and over here. Again, it's not an exact science, but you're basically just going from corner to corner and then working your way around, rather than starting in one place and going around like this, just making sure it all gets pulled up evenly by going corner to corner and back again until they are all done up. Alright, now that that's all bolted up, I'm just going to get rid of this oil tray out of the way. Okay, and then I'm going to put my sump plug back in. Normally we would replace the washer on this because it's a fibre washer. I actually don't have one today, so I'm going to have to reuse it. But it'll be alright to go around again. Just general practice. Normally we would replace that washer. Okay, and then we can chuck our oil filter back on. When I say chuck our oil filter back on, I mean put the new filter on. So I just dip my finger in the new oil and just put a coat of it around the seal there. Make sure the surface here is clean. That just gets done up firm. Don't have to overly swing on that. And then we're ready to put our exhaust back in. So you could put a bit of the old CRC exhaust cement around this end if you want to, remembering that we're not doing it at the front end because it's a flexi joint. And just as this goes in, we're just going to work around this flange a bit. So it's just got to twist and turn it a little bit to get it over the cross member. Right, so that's the exhaust done up, we're ready to put oil in now. Okay, so I'll just put the bottom cover back on here as well. So you got the plastic clips obviously that you took out. And then you've got two different types of bolts. You got these screw threaded ones. So they go up in the side and you'll see where they fit into little plastic fittings, and then the plain threaded bolts go down the front here. The ones with the little step on like that go through the bumper connections, okay, because they're thicker and that's what the step fits into. Okay, now we can let it down. Okay, so we've got about 4 litres in there now. It's going to hold more than that, but I'll just start it up first. Make sure the oil filter gets filled up. Cool, so when you start it up, You just want to make sure that the oil light goes out, and just let it run a little bit. Make sure the oil pressure has got time to get right up. Make sure the oil filter is full, which will drop this level down a bit. So now we can check it as it is and fill up as required. So normally on most cars, between low and full is a litre. That does vary a bit depending on what the car is, but on these generally should be around a litre. So according to that, I should need another 3/4 of a litre. And you'll normally find doing this that you'll use a bit more than what the recommended oil amount is, because the recommended oil amount allows for doing a service where you're just pulling the plug out. It doesn't allow for losing that little bit extra by taking the whole sump off. And that's it there, bang on full. Right, so that's that done. Now that we've done it for the third time, and you can see there wasn't really too much in that screen, it'll probably be safe for the next one just to be a straight service. Do it at 10,000 Ks, do the oil and filter, and then after that we might have to do another pull apart at 20,000, see how things are going. Yeah, but we'll see what the oil's going to look like after 10,000 Ks as well, because when you drain the oil you can tell sort of by the colour of it how much sludge it's picking up, as opposed to just, you know, used oil. So I hope that's helped you out today. Remember to click like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.